What a long, strange trip it's been. Yeah, it's been from hippie to hip and maybe hip replacement fairly soon. The hippie part of it was living in the United States and then um, coming back to do the autonomous house and almost immediately flipping out of that through the good graces of a professor I had, Cole James, to go and work in the federal government, to work for a short while with the former housing and urban design minister in the federal government, Tom Uren, and work on housing policy. I was actually designing houses for the federal government as low-cost housing. They were 107 square meters for a 3-bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, living, dining, and separate family room. I mean, that is tight planning, and all my planning comes from that exercise of a couple of years of trying to make what essentially are called govies in Canberra, government housing, and that's been the beginnings of the twin things. I'm wanting to do policy, and I'm wanting to do
Mm-hmm.
actual built work. So I'm teaching. So I've been on, I've in parallel to, more than 40 years of practice, I've had more than 40 years of teaching as well. And after a while, the kind of heavy toll of full-time teaching with a very small amount of practice gave way to flipping it the other way. And I started to work, as most younger architects do, although I was starting at middle age, on individual houses, but really wanting to get to medium density, to the low and close I'm talking about. And much of that was with private clients until I got to work with the not-for-profits. So I've worked for the Anglican Church, Anglicare, for the Uniting Church, who have been wonderful patrons and clients, for a couple of different branches of the Catholic Church, and a Buddhist group, the Nanjing Buddhists in south of Sydney. They all have an interest in low-cost or high-value low-cost housing. A lot of it's expressed in retirement villages, so we've done a lot of work in that. The retirement village, unfortunately, the model for much of it is kind of shrunken suburbia, which we've tried to escape from, but we can't. We're kind of making a mini version of it with really high sustainability components. We did one out at the Ponds, which is an area that has a huge amount of water conditioning, as the name suggests. And we were trialing ways in which we could redirect the water to feed the landscape to make a richer landscape in this retirement village and provide a community centre that didn't look like some kind of, God's waiting room, as it's sometimes referred to, or in our terms in Australia, a leagues club. The worst of our community buildings is often the leagues club. We tried to make it more like a little village centre, but those things look quite ordinary. I mean, they're not published, they're not awarded or anything else, but they're the work I'm immensely proud of because it's had feedback from people who live there, from the post-occupancy evaluations and everything. It's been incredibly successful because people identify a way of living in our courtyard houses, because that was the thing that we introduced to retirement living, and we've done quite a number of them now that are based around a private courtyard, shrinks your huge backyard and front yard into something that you can manage when you're in your 70s and 80s or 60s. And that's branched out now into the Faith Housing Alliance, on which I'm a member, in which the churches, the ones I mentioned before and others, are interested in replacing the defunct church with housing. And that's one of the things. We've done quite a number of those schemes and working on them at the moment.
Would it be fair to say, Tone, that at the heart of the conversation on sustainability, as you see it, is the idea of community? and that if we can somehow begin to heal communities, that is a prerequisite, a first step towards healing the planet. And that if we don't have functioning, vibrant, healthy communities, then everything else falls by the wayside. Would that be a fair summary?
Yes, I think that there are a number of buildings that we've done that are technologically challenging and quite interesting, but they don't give me the same sense of satisfaction and the sense of using your architectural skills to its best ability as the community work. I mean, we've done, for instance, we did the first 6-star Green Star factory and warehouse building that makes insulation panels. That's based in Melbourne, one of only 3 for that company around the world. We also designed an indoor ski centre, which sounds kind of completely counterintuitive, but it's basically what Australians would call a giant esky, But the interesting thing about that is that it has enormous amount of employment and an enormous amount of, it becomes a community centre in an area where sport is a very big thing in Western Sydney, and it becomes a sports centre, and it has a number of different other activities that were in there. And once I got past the technological parts of how you make a very big chili bin, big iced box, and he got into the other parts of the building are far more interesting about, how do you have people moving through from, hot summer outside to go into a winter inside the building, and what happens along the way. They're technologically interesting, and we've done office buildings and other things like that. But the things that are really challenging is a good 3-story and a good 6-story apartment building. They're the 2 challenges that I think I've had a red hot go at, as we say, to make good, high quality houses in not that high, but very compact. And that they're not sensational, you know. I mean, one of your earlier podcasts, you had Bjarke Ingels talking about some of his very dramatic buildings, which I visited in Copenhagen, and they are truly astonishing. But I think that works in that community and that climate. Hopefully, somebody just goes past one of our buildings and it's hardly noticeable. It's just yet another another good little apartment building in amongst other buildings, which I think is a testament to actually doing good work without having good work. The satisfaction is in what you've done in the building, not in the awards and the hero shots and the publications and stuff.
Last question, Tone, and I ask this of all my guests. What gives you hope?
The thing that gives me the most hope is that you could take the suburbia, the desolate, socially isolated, my mother trapped at home because he had no car, suburbia, right, with a long distance walk to school and so on, that you could turn that into something that was a vibrant village community with hundreds of villages. The thing that is remarkable about London, even more so than Paris or perhaps New York, is the ability to have villages within a city. And what gives me hope is that for so long we've had these very kind of almost possibilities in our suburbs, and it needs a group of people. It needs planners, landscape architects, engineers. It needs a group approach to work out how you can tweak it. I'm not one for the giant scheme, as you would have already understood. The giant mega solution does not exist.